Komið sæl og velkomin í þetta spjall álagsstýringu. Samtök ferðaþjónustunnar héldu Ferðaþjónustudaginn 2024 hátíðlegan með ráðstefnu í Hörpu í október í samstarfi við Þingvallaþjóðgarð, Vatnajökulsþjóðgarð, Ferðamálastofu og Umhverfisstofnun. Og meðal fyrirlesara á ráðstefnu var Tim Bamford frá Department of Conservation í Nýja Sjálandi. Welcome, Tim, and thank you for being with us at the conference and here at this little chat.
Kia ora koutou, great to be here, Jóhannes, thank you.
Kia ora, Tim, thank you. One of the things that you highlighted in your presentation was the need for infrastructure, but as well as being a need for infrastructure to kind of accept more visitor numbers, you found that if you build infrastructure, more visitors will come. Has your experience been with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the sort of bigger impacts that we've found from an increased number of visitors at particular sites is crowding and congestion, which results in safety issues in terms of people parking where they shouldn't, parking outside of car parks on highways, which means it's difficult for cars to pass, and also human waste issues with there not being appropriate facilities for rubbish and going to the bathrooms. And so the natural response to that is to look at how many people are there and then to build facilities that cater to the number of people that are going. And we've got numerous examples of doing this at our top visitor sites across the country. What we have found is that once we do that, rather than meeting the demand with the new supply, it creates more demand, and we get into this cycle where the same impacts, they may be mitigated for half a season or a season or two, but essentially you build it and they will come. And I show a photo of some investment that we put in place in Old Aki Mount Cook. We spent around $1 million US building a new car park and toileting facilities, and within a very short period of time people were again parking on the highway leading into the area on both sides, which essentially makes a one-way road and a very busy road, which causes visitor safety issues for people walking to the park, etc. And so we've found that whilst infrastructure is a key part of the issue, we need to think more broadly than just jumping to building bigger and say better. We need to think about visitor flows, communication, what are people's needs and motivations, and how you help them move through a destination.
I mean, one of the things that you have tried is putting a price on, like, let's say, hiking trails, a different price on different trails and other attractions. You had some interesting insights in how that pricing affects people's kind of perceived value.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that we have done is we've put differential or different prices on our Great Walks, which are our premier multi-day overnight hikes in New Zealand, where the hike that we perceive to be the most popular is the most expensive, and the hike that is still absolutely world class, but not as perceived to be as high a demand as, say, Milford Sound, has a lower price. And we have, our initial reasons for doing this was both to raise revenue, but also to try and manage demand, to reduce the amount of people who wanted to go on that walk, because we had assumed that instead of paying $100 roughly US to stay on the Milford, they would look to spend $60 US to stay on the Routeburn or $30 US to stay on the Heaphy per night. But what we found is that, especially with long-haul tourists, when they looked at the prices, what they jumped to was that the hike that was more expensive must be in better scenery and must be a better experience. And so it actually, every year since we've increased the prices, the Milford Sound, which is our most expensive hike, sells out disproportionately quicker in bed nights than the others. So for example, this year it sold out in roughly 4 minutes, whereas other hikes were taking a day to sell out or 2 days to sell out.
So, like, while this can be a good source of revenue for DOC, it's not kind of, the price alone is not a viable visitor use management tool.
Not for certain types of experience.
Yeah.
So we're now looking at pricing predominantly as revenue generation with co-benefits of demand management, but in many cases it doesn't achieve demand management. In fact, the opposite, because of that perceived benefit from the price being high, people correlate that with the experience must be better.
Yeah. Exactly. That's quite interesting. You had like two examples of how clear messaging in the booking systems, where you have put up booking systems, has led to a decision to avoid like hard limits on certain experiences, and where kind of a suggested time frame to spend at a destination that is not enforced had an effect of people respecting the suggestions. How does that messaging work?
So something that we have been trialling with the Tongariro crossing, which is New Zealand's most popular day hike, is we've put that day hike on the booking system, and in doing so we are starting to communicate to visitors once the bookings for that day reach a particular point. There's a message that explains to people, hey, it's going to be quite busy today. Still feel free to book, but you may want to book on another day. And the more people book on that day, the more kind of frank that messaging becomes. And hey, now it's going to be really busy. You can still come, but may want to book on another day. And we've found that when we started this pilot, it was walking towards setting a hard limit, but we were actually collectively achieving the management outcomes of managing that place that we were hoping a hard limit would lead to. And so now the conversation is saying, like, why would we need a hard limit when we're achieving the management outcomes we can with mechanisms, including the one that we just talked about?
Yeah. I thought it was interesting as well that you were talking about a beach location where you had a suggested time frame of 1 hour, which has kind of stopped a huge amount of people stopping for the whole day, and kind of had people respecting the suggestion, even though it's not enforced in any way. That's quite interesting how the messaging can be used.
Yeah, so for example, quite like Iceland, a number of these experiences that you go to, you walk to them or you go via a vehicle, and it's actually quite a small, like it's quite a condensed zone, a small landing point, and so you don't need that long to experience it, but the longer you're there, the more congested it becomes. And so exactly that. We're communicating that, hey, spending an hour here is probably enough to experience it, and that means whilst the same number of people are visiting per day, at any one time there is a less number of visitors, so it feels, or it is less crowded.
Yeah. So you mentioned as well that DOC has like a third of land in New Zealand in its care, and within it there's multiple experiences that you are running, and you mentioned that many of those are perhaps better suited for private companies to take over than the government institutions.
Yeah, so we're getting really clear as a department around what's our role in providing facilities and services and experiences, and what's better suited by industry. And so, for example, your core infrastructure of your tracks and your car parks and your toilets and the servicing of them is something that makes sense for the department to be providing. Higher levels of service, like guided trips, high levels of facilities and lodges, etc., tend to be better provided by businesses, and so that's something that we're working through, is getting a lot clearer, because at the moment it's been kind of a bit of a grey line where we have stepped towards providing high levels of service, and now realising that actually there's a better experience is provided often when a third party or industry provides that experience rather than the department.
That's something that many of the private companies here are looking towards. That government can kind of outsource some of these things to private companies. But I mean, generally, to kind of wrap up, I mean, you spent a few days here in Iceland now with in the conference, talking to people from the agencies here with the private sector, listening to the other speakers. Are there any points that you kind of take away from the conference and your experience here in Iceland that you see that can be kind of maybe implemented or can add to the conversation in New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that struck me was the Icelandic way of breathing in Iceland and the limited amount of interpretation at sites and the different way of interacting with that site given the reduced amount of interpretation, and so that's definitely something that I'll be taking back. And then how you are designing your experiences to facilitate visitor flow, I think, is something that will be of very much interest to us.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Tim, for coming all the way to Iceland to be with us, and thank you for having this chat, and hope you have a safe flight home.
Nā mihi, thanks for the hospitality.
Thank you.